Greetings, alumni, fans, and friends of the University of Iowa. I'm Colin Hennessy, Vice President for Alumni and Donor Engagement at the University of Iowa Center for Advancement, and I'm excited to welcome you to a new program called Home with the Hawkeyes. If you're like me in January and maybe have a little cabin fever, this program is sure to help resolve that. Today, I'm joined by my friend Dave Conrads from the Iowa Raptor Project in the College of Education. Dave, you've brought a friend with you.
I have, yes. This is Hawkeyes, and she's a dark morph western red-tailed hawk, the first ever to fly at Kinnick Stadium. And she's just one of many raptors that we have at the Iowa Raptor Project that serve as ambassadors to tell the conservation message that so many Iowans and alumni want to hear.
Well, I can't wait to learn more. Thanks all for joining us.
I'm Dave Conrads. I'm the director of the Iowa Raptor Project. It's part of the UI Wild department in the College of Education. WILD is an acronym for Wildlife Instruction and Leadership Development. The Raptor Project began in 1985. Its focus originally was raptor rehabilitation and education, and now it is currently more focused on research and education. So our mission really is to provide transformative educational and research experiences for our students and for the people of the state of Iowa. The research that we do out here is to really understand the plight facing birds of prey. Right now we're in a hawk blind where we trap and band migrating hawks and owls at night. And what we're trying to learn is about hawk migration as well as longevity of the birds that we band. So when we band birds, a lot of people ask, why do you do that? And the two main reasons out there are they tell us about migration routes, but it also tells us about longevity. And so when we captured this red-tailed hawk back in 1995 as a first-year bird, set it free like we've had with hundreds of red-tails over the years, we just assumed that, its chances were to probably not make it through that winter. But then to get a report a couple weeks ago that that bird was just recovered this past spring and lived to be 29, that tells us a lot. It tells us a lot about the hardiness of red-tailed hawks, especially here in the upper Midwest. It's just a fascinating story. That this bird has seen so many years and raised how many young? Well over 70 birds might have been produced. So there's a lot of things that we can learn.
This is Walter. He is a male Harris's hawk. He is a species that is found in a desert ecosystem. So Harris's hawks will often hunt in family groups where they will perch on cacti and hunt for jackrabbits. And in the raptor world, it is very rare for them to hunt in groups. So that's a pretty amazing fact about the Harris's hawk. He was one of the original birds to fly at Kinnick Stadium. He would fly out of the press box, go right down to the field during the national anthem.
So this is Hawkeyes. Hawkeyes is a dark morph red-tailed hawk. And it's kind of rare to see this particular subspecies in Iowa. The kinds that we have here are eastern red-tails, and those are all light-colored. Hawkeyes is 3 years old. She was hatched in 2021, and she was going to be sent overseas to be used for falconry. She was bred in captivity in Nevada, but during that time, one of the parents stepped on her eye, and it got infected, and so the right eye was removed. At that point, they offered Hawkeyes to the University of Iowa to be used for educational programming. And we did train her. She's the original hawk to fly at Kinnick Stadium. So in the fall of 21, she made her first flights, and then we began with her in the fall of 22, and later we trained Walter to fly at Kinnick for those events. And just a spectacular, beautiful bird. Our birds have done really well in those flighted situations. From the Learfield box and then down to the field where at the back of the hackles of the tiger hawk on the field, we would have the falconer luring them down. So if you look at the tiger hawk symbol and those kind of four feathers that are in the back of the tiger hawk, those are the hackles. Yeah. And it's great enrichment for them. They love to fly. They're made to fly, and if they're fully flighted, then we think it's kind of in their interest even to allow them to do that. Birds of prey are great icons for telling conservation messages. We're the Hawkeye state, right? So hawks really do tell a story.
Welcome back. In the next 2 segments, you'll hear how our students are gaining hands-on experience working with our faculty and research staff in the UI Department of Physics and Astronomy. And fan favorite, Lauren Lessing is back to share 2 pieces from the UI Stanley Museum of Art's collection.
I am Mary Hall Reno, and I'm a professor and department chair of the Department of Physics and Astronomy. It's an exciting opportunity for students to work with faculty to put instruments in space, working on physics from the subatomic scales all the way out to the far reaches of the universe.
So the University of Iowa builds instruments that go into space. We've had instruments on missions that have visited almost every planet in our solar system, as well as asteroids and comets.
I had no idea that the University of Iowa is so involved in space physics and space flight research.
Well, most Iowans don't realize that space science started right here in this department with Dr. James Van Allen. He was interested in mapping the flux of galactic cosmic rays that come into our atmosphere. And he kept striving to go higher and higher. And he was also involved with early efforts to put a satellite in orbit from the United States.
I heard the physics program was good because my high school teacher was an alum, but I had no idea how deep the legacy went.
We of course have a huge role in the Voyager space probes that are still going after almost 50 years. And we've had students involved in every single one of those missions from the beginning all the way to the present day.
And I can tell you, like, this is a really special place. It is one of a kind for being able to take students and actually have them work on NASA hardware.
It's always been a student active operation here.
So we involve our students in things like testing instruments and building plans for instruments that will eventually go into space.
There are very few places in the world where you actually have the level of expertise needed to execute at that level while also having an educational or a primarily educational mission. Student involvement means we can extend our reach.
Recently I've been working on a project called Tracers.
Tracers is 2 satellites that will be orbiting the Earth at the same time.
Here at Iowa, we led the Tracers mission and we also built some of the science instruments.
Yeah, the first time that the University of Iowa is like heading its own new mission, so a lot of the times research missions will be tandem off of another previously existing one, but Tracers is like a whole new objective.
And I'm really into these immersive, hands-on type experiences because it can change an entire student's career trajectory and what they want to do with their life.
So my PhD project is going to be part of this student-led project called OCRE. And OCRE stands for Observing Cusp Reconnection and Electrodynamics. So part of our mission is to kind of replicate Tracers' mission, but in rocket form. So Tracers flies over at around 500 kilometers. We're going to launch from Andøya in Norway, and we're going to fly up to around 1,000 kilometers. We look for things like solar wind speed, densities, things like that. So we have not only OCRE data, but Tracers data, and hopefully we'll be able to combine them and get some really cool results.
I just feel like that is the most valuable part of my position, is being that spark in a student's life that makes them think, I want to do space research or I want to go into space physics.
I get to work on a project that is in support of NASA goals, and what I get to do is work on developing a component called a diffraction grating. What a diffraction grating is something that takes white light and it splits it all up into its different colors. And the reason that we want to see all of that light in different colors is that the different colors correspond to different energies, which tell us something about the physics that's happening out in the universe. So we can't always send a rocket ship or a telescope all the way out into far distant galaxies, but what we can do is look at the light coming from those places, break it up into its energy components, and learn a lot about what's happening in those places.
Students are the foundation of the research that we do here in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. We have lots of graduate students, we have lots of undergraduate students, so we love having the student support, and then of course it trains them to go on to the next phase of their careers.
These techniques that are developed for the computational industry can be really applied across a whole wide variety of research challenges, research problems. Government labs are interested in solving problems, industry is interested in solving these problems, and finding kind of this NASA-supported work where we tie all of these different industries, these different research components together, makes for a future where we can continue to solve really interesting problems.
Certainly we have stellar professors here in the department, but they're all very anxious to get their students involved in their work.
There's a reason that students come here to work on space-based research, astrophysics, and space physics, because we have that legacy and that history in-house.
It's definitely something I'm not taking for granted now that I am here, and I'm taking advantage of all the opportunities I can.
Welcome to the University of Iowa's Stanley Museum of Art. I'm Lauren Lessing, the director of the museum, and it's such a pleasure to have you here in the galleries with us to help alleviate cabin fever this year. So I'm standing with a wonderful work from 1973 by alumnus Charles Ray. His career has certainly taken flight in the years since he graduated in 1973, and this is actually his thesis piece. And before I tell you more about what you're seeing here, I want to give you a little bit of context. Ray was a student here in 1970, and that was the year that the university brought an artist named Robert Wilson to campus. Wilson had a deaf son, and he was interested in what it might mean to create an opera or a piece of music for people who had hearing loss or who were completely deaf. And so he composed a piece called The Deafman Glance that was first performed here at the University of Iowa. And that artwork was actually created in dialogue with students. One of those students was Charles Ray. The piece itself, the opera, included chairs that floated, that rose and lowered, and many different aspects of set design that defied gravity. Charles Ray went on in his work as a student to think a lot about weight and gravity in his artwork. So one work that he did just before he created this work involved his own body, and he had friends help him pin himself to a wall with a large plank of wood, and then hung suspended first by his knees, and then second, by his midsection from that plank, sort of positioned against a wall. So thinking about how weight and gravity shape form and how to place himself within a composition of that kind, he drew those ideas directly, I think, from his work with Robert Wilson. In this work, he's no longer including his own body in the composition, but he's dealing with similar themes. So he took a stack of bricks from the ceramics studio at the University of Iowa. These are all bricks that would have been used to build a kiln. And of course, bricks are also works of ceramic. So these killed bricks, a piece of hemp rope, and then a sawhorse from the painting studio. And you can see by looking at the sawhorse that somebody was spray painting a work that had been propped on that sawhorse just a little bit before Ray nabbed it. And he brings all of these objects together in a way that has drama. It has compositional drama when you think about the range of different colors and textures that are represented here, but it also has narrative drama because you can't walk by this work and engage with it and spend any time with it without imagining what would happen if somebody just pulled the end of that rope, untied that knot, and you can imagine the bricks crashing to the ground. They're all held in tension by this rope, so there's a lot of inherent drama just in the physical tension of the rope holding the weight of these bricks together. And of course, much like the chairs in Robert Wilson's stage design, defying gravity and the way that they're held aloft and suspended above the ground in this composition. So this work by Joan Miró is a wonderful example not only of a depiction of flight, but also of games that you can play if you have cabin fever. This is a dewdrop falling from a bird's wing wakes Rosalie, who has been asleep in the shadow of a spider web, from 1939. Now that's quite a long title, so it's important to know that that title derives from a kind of game called an exquisite corpse, where you sit around with a group of friends and you pass a paper from one person to another, and each person writes a word or a line and then folds the paper over to conceal it before they pass it to the person on their left. Once the paper has made its way all around the circle, you unfold it and you have a poem. So that's exactly how Miró came up with this very fanciful title. I think the title probably came second. First, he made this picture. This is one of his burlap paintings that he started making while he was staying in a cabin in Normandy in 1939. There was a lot of tumult in the world at that time, especially in Europe. And Miró was on vacation with a few friends. He had kind of tucked himself away from the city of Paris, from the war that was unfolding in the East. And he was interested in using art as a way to escape. And so he developed a technique with other friends of his who were in the Surrealist movement, where he would have someone blindfold him, and then he would take a pencil or a pen, and he would just make random shapes with his arm on the surface of that rough textured cloth. Then he'd take the blindfold off, look at all the squiggles that he had created, erase some of them, make others darker, and then fill in some of the shapes. And he just, like a Rorschach test, used whatever his imagination conjured up in these swirls of lines as a kind of key to imagery that then could serve as a catalyst for the kind of poem game that I described just a moment ago. And so in this case, you can see some of the images that the authors of that exquisite corpse poem seized on in the lines that they wrote. An eye, which perhaps belongs to the sleeping Rosalie, several birds in the upper right quadrant here, a spider web in the lower right, and other forms that you can use your imagination to interpret. So I hope I've given you some tools to combat cabin fever, and I hope that I see all of you here in the new year visiting the Stanley to see these works in person.